10, 5, Torrey Horton back to the end zone.
48-yard play. Guess who? Body up the middle, making another move to the outside. 15, 10, end zone again.
Keeps it. Nice move by Brown. He's got space. He's got 6. 35-yard touchdown for Byron Brown. A record-setting night for the South Florida quarterback.
Down so far, a little bit of a high snap. Genty right up the middle. Genty has room. Ashton Genty, give him 6.
Second and long. Lagar tries to pin it in. Ramos, it does. Ramos stays up. The Suns offense 4-3 wins. Incredible effort for Ramos.
The G5 Hive. All G5, all the time.
Welcome to the G5 Hive Live. We are excited to bring you the G5 college football coverage you love each and every week. I am Luke, and I'm joined by my co-host, Justice. Well, if you're watching us on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. If you're watching us on X, please give us a follow, a like, and a retweet. And if you're listening to us in podcast form, please rate and review. And don't forget, the G5 Hive merchandise stores is now live. The link is in the YouTube video comments as well as pinned on our X page. There at the bottom of the screen. If
here we go.
Find it.
There we go.
All right. It is right there.
Yeah, that's the best way to support us. Number one, like if you're watching right now, if you're on YouTube, hit that like button. Like the more likes we can get, the more the algorithm likes it, the more faces we can get in front of. If you're not a subscriber yet on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. We're pretty close to 500. I think we're sitting at like 475. So if you're not a subscriber, please hit that subscribe button on YouTube. And lastly, if you want some sweet merchandise, visit the link at the bottom, buy some merchandise, and that's the best way you can support the work we're doing.
All right, well, let's get into our G5 Hive 2020, guys. Let's get into our quarterbacks. Now, our 2020 for the quarterbacks, you've got to be in the top 20 for pass attempts, and you have to be in the top 20 for passing yards. And if you happen to be in the top 20 in both of those, you make this list. So let's get into it. Quarterbacks, Chandler Morris, the North Texas, comes in at number 1. He's got the most passing attempts, yards per game, completions per game in the whole G5. He has the second least amount of big-time throws of these 2020 guys, the second least amount of time to throw of the 2020 guys with 2.48 seconds, yet he still has the most big-time throws in the G5 with 23. Number 2, making a big jump up here, is Jalen Kitna, UAB. The last 4 games, he has been throwing a lot. He's averages 42 passes a game, 317 yards passing per game, which is second in the G5. However, he's got the second lowest ADOT of the 2020 guys with 7.7. He's got the second most time to throw of the 2020 guys with 2.88 seconds. Crazy enough, in his 4 starts, he now has 12 turnover-worthy plays. The leader sits at 16 in the whole G5. So, he's chucking it. And he's got a lot of opportunities. It just happens to been working out in his favor. I don't know if we're going to talk about him at all today, but Cam Shanks, twitched up little wide receiver for UAB. They're not throwing the ball super far down the field. Like I said, he's got a pretty low ADOT or average depth of target of 7.7. You get Cam Shanks just in some open – he does punt return and kick returns for UAB. You just give him the ball in space and let him do his thing. That's why I think Cam Shanks has shown up and shown out the last few weeks. Spencer Petras comes in at number 3, Utah State, throwing for 304 yards per game, which is third in the G5. Him, Kitna, and Morris are the only ones throwing over 300 yards per game in the G5. Joey Aguilar, number 4, App State, 18 touchdowns, which is tied for third in the G5, averaging the highest average depth of target of the 2020 guys with 11.4 yards. He's got the most turnover-worthy plays in the G5 with 16. So he's checking the ball a lot, and he's putting it into harm's way too. Owen McCowan at number 5, UTSA, the second most touchdowns in the G5 with 20. He is tied with a quarterback that we'll talk about later in Jordan McLeod. Seth Hennigan here at number 6. Devin Dampier at 7, New Mexico. Seth Hennigan, Memphis Tigers. Devin Dampier, like I said, here at number 7, New Mexico. The most rushing attempts per game of the 2020 guys with 10. For reference, Bryson Daly averages 20 per game. Tyler Huff averages 13. So he's running the ball quite a bit. He averages 84 yards per game on the ground, which is 4th in the G5, only behind Daly, Horvath, and Huff. Number 8, we've got Evan Simon at Temple coming off their bye this week. We'll look at what they've got going on this week, see if he can stay in the mix. Tucker Gleason, Toledo, comes in at number 9. He's tied with one other with the least amount of pass attempts in the 2020 group with 31. Sneaky is Gleason with his 18 touchdowns, which is tied for 3rd in the G5, but the least amount of completions per game of the 2020 guys with 19. I just talked to you about the least amount of pass attempts. He was tied with one other. That person is number 10, Jordan McLeod, Texas State, with those 31 pass attempts per game. He's thrown for the second most touchdowns, though, in the G5 with 20. He's got the least amount of turnover-worthy plays of the 2020 guys with 5. So he's been pretty efficient with the ball. Cole Snyder comes in at number 11, Eastern Michigan. He averages 9 rushes per game. 12, Braden Shager, Hawaii. Number 13, Nicholas Fadiato, Middle Tennessee. Number 14, Mikey Keene, Fresno State. 15, Jalen Rayner, Arkansas State. He's thrown for the least amount of touchdowns of these 2020 guys with 7. And then EJ Warner Rice, he jumps back into this group. He was in there earlier, been out for a while, now jumps back in. He's throwing for the least amount of yards per game of the 2020 guys with 228, averages one rush attempt per game, which is the least amount of these 2020 guys. He's got the lowest ADOT of the 2020 guys with 7.4 and the least amount of time to throw of these 2020 guys with 2.47 seconds. Moving over to the running backs, everyone on this list has 93 yards per game or more with at least 17 opportunities per game. These 2020 guys, again, are top 20 in total touches, in top 20 in total yards. You meet both the thresholds, you make this list. I do want to mention, Justice talked about at the beginning for Wyoming, Harrison Whaley did come back. He had 27 touches for 170 yards and 1 touchdown in that game back, so he would have propelled up. He would have been above Ashton Genty. It's a 1-game sample size, so I'm not yet putting him in here. Again, he's only got 4 games to work with. So I want to make sure that I at least mentioned it, but I excluded him from this. Ashton Genty comes in at number 1, Boise State. He's averaging 200 yards per game, which leads the G5 in touchdowns with 20. First in the G5 in forced missed tackles with 83. We got Mekhi Hughes at number 2. Number 3, Mario Anderson at Memphis. Second in the G5 in receptions per game with 4. Russell Faison at number 4 for Utah State. Number 5, Marquez Cooper, San Diego State. Number 6, Trey Stewart, Jacksonville State. Number 7, Ahmad Hardy, Louisiana. He's averaging 101 rush yards per game as a freshman. Second in the G5 in forced missed tackles with 59. Number 8, Dean Connors, Rice, not getting as much rushing work of the 2020 guys, only 12 attempts per game. However, he has 17 touches per game, leads the G5 in receptions per game with 5. Number 9, Braden Sloan, Ball State, not getting as much rushing work either, only 15 attempts per game and 18 touches per game. He leads the G5 in receiving yards per game with 39. Ishmael Mahdi comes in at number 10 for Texas State, friend of the podcast. Avery Morrow, Colorado State, comes in at number 11. Number 12, Quentin Cooley for Liberty. Ontario Brown, NIU comes in at 13 and 14. Terrion Stewart, Bowling Green, he's averaging the least amount of yards per game of these 2020 guys with 93. Second in the G5 with touchdowns with 15. Wide receivers. All the guys here are averaging 74 or more yards per game. Again, 2020 guys, they're going to be in the top 20 in targets and the top 20 in receiving yards. If you happen to be top 20 in both of these categories, you make this list. Number 1, Nick Nash, San Jose State. He leads the G5 in targets per game with 15. Only wide receiver in the G5 averaging double-digit receptions per game with 10. He's got the most touchdowns in the G5 with 12. Jalen Royals, we'll keep him in there because I have a sneaking suspicion we might see him still here this year. So I'm going to leave him in here. Jalen Royals, Utah State, second in the G5 in targets per game with 11. Only him and Nash are averaging 100 yards or more per game as wide receivers. Cade Robinson, number 3, App State, finally got his first touchdown of the year. That's been my stat with him pretty much all year. He's yet to have a touchdown, but he's been getting a lot of targets, getting a lot of yards. He's been Mr. Consistent. Glad he found the end zone. Well, except for Justice. He's like, I wish it wouldn't have been against ODU. But here we are. Number 4, Ricky White, UNLV. Number 5, DT Sheffield, North Texas. He's tied for second in the G5 with touchdowns with Deron Newton, who's not on this list, dropped out this week. He's got a 6.2 average depth of target, which is the lowest of these 2020 guys. Yet he's got a 9.4 yards after catch per reception, which is the highest of the 2022 guys, or the 2020 guys. Get the ball in space for DT Sheffield. Number 6, Corey Rucker, Arkansas State, averaging 10 targets per game, tied for the least amount of receptions per game of the 2020 guys with 5. If opportunities there, if he can catch a couple more, that he could really shoot up these rankings. Number 7, Jamal Pritchett, South Alabama. Number 8, Devontae Ross, Troy. Tied for last of the 2020 guys in targets per game with 8. He's tied for the least amount of receptions per game of the 2020 guys with 5. Obviously, that change there at quarterback, Goose Crowder, not slinging the ball around has hurt Devontae Ross, but he still, I think it was this last week, still had a pretty good game, but I just don't think it's as consistent, and you can know like when is this good game or not. Dante Wright, number 9, Temple, tied for last of the 2020 guys in targets per game with 8. He's last among the 2020 guys in yards per game with 74. Again, he had a lower body injury 2 weeks ago, had a bye week this week. I think we see him back this week. Luke Wysong, New Mexico, only 1 touchdown on the year. He comes in at number 10. That's the least amount for this 2020 guys, and he's got the lowest yards after catch of the 2020 guys with 3.8. I hope to see him back here. It sounds like he was close. I think we see Luke Wysong maybe work his way back up these rankings. Number 11, Amari Kelly, Middle Tennessee. He's tied for last of the 2020 guys in targets per game with 8. He's tied for the least amount of receptions per game of the 2020 guys with 5. He's got an average depth of target at 14.9 yards, which is the highest of the 2020 guys. So, it kind of makes sense. You've got the highest average depth of target, which is great. You're getting a whole bunch of targets here, but it's kind of tied for last of these 2020 guys, and you're getting the least amount of receptions. Obviously, the ball farther down the field, less likely to catch it. So all of that math kind of adds up if you think about it. And then coming in at number 12, Camden Benjamin, Tulsa. Let's round out the offense with the tight ends. Harold Fannin Jr. comes in at number 1, Bowling Green. He averages 10 targets, 8 receptions, and 118 yards per game. He's got 6 touchdowns on the season. Number 2, Tanner Kozo, Ball State, 9 targets, 8 receptions, 72 yards per game. He's also got 6 touchdowns. And like you mentioned, Justice, you've got Tight End Tuesday. Features both of these guys. Holden Willis comes in at number 3, Middle Tennessee. He averages 6 targets, 4 receptions, and 66 yards per game. He's got 3 touchdowns on the season. Dorian Fleming, Georgia State, comes in at number 4. he averages 6 targets, 4 receptions, 44 yards. He's got 2 touchdowns on the season. This week I switched up him and Terrence Carter comes in at number 5, Louisiana. He averages 4 targets, 4 receptions, and 64 yards per game. He's got 4 touchdowns on the season. The only reason I moved Dorian Fleming above Terrence Carter this week is because of the 6 targets. He's getting you 2 more, still the same amount of receptions. Terrence Carter getting you more yards, more touchdown upside. But if you follow the process that he's getting the targets, maybe the touchdowns and the yards come. But that was the main shift this week. Justice, what do we got for the defensive side of the ball?
All right, we're going to start off with the defensive ends or edges, week 10. These guys are all ranked based on havoc rate, and they also have to meet a snap count. We use 30 snaps per game as kind of like the minimum to make the list. But number 1, been on the list every week, been our defensive player of the week multiple times, Mike Green, Marshall, havoc rate of 16.4%. He ranks second among defensive end in sacks with 10. Number 2, Eric O'Neill out of James Madison, havoc rate of 15.3%, has a rush win rate of 16%. Number 3, Bradley Weaver, Ohio, havoc rate of 14.6%. He ranks 5th in sacks with 6. Number 4, our defensive player of the week this week, Elijah Robinson, Hawaii, havoc rate also of 14.6%, has 27 stops, which are stops on 3rd and 4th down, stopping the opposing offense, and that ranks 3rd among defensive ends. And rounding out the top 5, Brian Ugwu, Miami, havoc rate of 13.9%. He ranks 1st among defensive ends and quarterback pressures with 37. Moving over to the defensive tackles, same stat, havoc rate. That's what they're ranked by. Anthony Hawkins, Bowling Green, moves back up to number 1, havoc rate of 10.8%. He ranks 3rd among defensive tackles in sacks with 4. Number 2, new to the list, R.J. Jackson, Tulsa, havoc rate of 10.3%, and he has 14 quarterback pressures on the season. Number 3, Deonta Johnson, East Carolina, havoc rate of 10.1%, and he ranks 1st among defensive tackles and tackles for loss with 5. Number 4, also new to the list, Patrick Jenkins, Tulane, havoc rate of 9.9%, and has a rush win rate of 10.3%. And rounding out our top 5, Darius Alexander from Toledo, havoc rate of 9.6%. He ranks 4th among defensive tackles and stops with 17. Moving over to the linebackers, it's been this same group, I think, for 3 weeks in a row now. They just kind of changed positions a little bit. But who doesn't change positions? And still number 1, linebacker Sean Dolak, Buffalo, 11.89 tackles per game. He ranks 1st in stops with 54. Number 2, linebacker Travion Barnes, Florida International, 11.33 tackles per game, and he has 11 total quarterback pressures on the season. Linebacker Sean Dolak's teammate, Red Murdoch, Buffalo, number 3, 11.22 tackles per game. He has a very low missed tackle rate of 10.6%. Should be noted that I believe there are 3 linebackers in college football with over 100 tackles, and 2 of them paid for Buffalo, Sean Dolak and Red Murdoch. Number 4, Colin Ramos from Navy, averaging 10.88 tackles per game, and he has 6 tackles for loss. And rounding out our top 5, Jaden Yates of Marshall, 9 tackles per game, and he also has a low missed tackle rate of 12.2%. Moving over to our defensive backs, we're going to start with cornerbacks. The defensive backs are all ranked on adjusted net yards against per coverage snap. So that's basically a measure, how are they doing when they are targeted in coverage. Number 1, cornerback Deshaun Peel, Navy, an adjusted net yards against of negative 0.278. He ranks 3rd in interceptions with 4. Should be noted that, usually in NFL, if you use this stat, you're looking guys right around 3. And all these guys are under 3. Deshaun is the only cornerback with a negative number. Number 2, cornerback Dante Joyner, Arkansas State, adjusted net yards against of 0.097, and he averages 4.63 tackles per game. Number 3, Terrence Spence, James Madison, adjusted net yards against of 0.113, and he ranks first in interceptions among cornerbacks with 5. Number 4, Torrey Richardson, Temple, adjusted net yards against of 0.231. He has 5 pass breakups on the year. And rounding out the top 5 and new to the list, former 5-star recruit. He was at Texas A&M, LSU, Denver Harris, now at UTSA, adjusted net yards against of 0.236 and has a quarterback rating against of 51.0. Moving over to the safeties, again, same metric, adjusted net yards against per coverage snap. And we have a new number 1. Jerron Manning had been number 1 for, I think, since we started tracking this year. But now Jacob Thomas, who was on a bye this week, of James Madison, is the new number 1. Adjusted net yards against of negative 0.389. He has a quarterback rating against of 0.0. Jerron Manning, Old Dominion, number 2. Negative 0.361 is his adjusted net yard against. So just a couple points, or tenths of a point behind Jacob Thomas. He has a quarterback rating against of 13.9. Number 3, we have a pair of teammates here at number 3 and number 4. They have both been on the list a couple times this year. Safety Tyrone Lewis, Louisiana, adjusted net yards against of negative 0.2. He averages 5.5 tackles per game. And his teammate Tyree Skipper, Louisiana, comes in at number 4, adjusted net yards against of negative 0.237. And he ranks 4th, and interceptions are 3. And rounding out our top 5 is Wydett Williams Jr., Louisiana Monroe, adjusted net yards against of negative 2.67, and he averages 7 tackles per game. And that's going to round out our 2020 players, which are the top players at the various positions among the G5.
All right. That's going to do it for the show this week. Come back to join us next week as we discuss what happened in Week 11, as well as look forward to Week 12 of the 2024 season. And as always, bring you up to date on all the latest news and happenings in the world of G5 college football. If you're watching us on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. If you're watching us on X, please give us a retweet, a like, and a follow. And if you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please subscribe and leave those 5-star ratings and review. Thank you all for your support. Until the next time, we are the G5 Hive.